Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Peace's guest speaker series as we've been continuing to talk to paralegal and lawyer bencher candidates. As always, the views and opinions are of the candidates alone, and they don't reflect me, Justice and Peace's Charles College, or any other education institution or organization I'm affiliated with. Continuing on this evening, we have Mike joining us. So, first of all, Mike, thanks for taking the time to speak with us, and perhaps we can get started. You can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, JP, and thanks for having me. So my name is Mike Winward. I was called to the bar in 1985. I started practicing law in a firm that is now Mackesy Smy. It's an 11 lawyer firm in Hamilton, and I have been there ever since 1985. My practice is in civil litigation. I have a strong emphasis on personal injury law on the plaintiff side. I have been a certified specialist in civil litigation since 2001. About 20 plus years ago, I decided I wanted to get involved with my local law association, which is the Hamilton Law Association. So I volunteered to join some committees. Ultimately, that led to me being on the board of trustees for the Hamilton Law Association. And then I became the president of the association from 2010 to 2011. After my term as the president was over, I became the Central South Region representative for what was then called the County and District Law Presidents Association, but it's now called the Federation of Ontario Law Associations, or FOLA. And just so your viewers understand, FOLA is an umbrella organization that represents all the 48 local law associations in the province, from Rainy River on one end of the province to Cornwall on the other, and then everything in between. And then in November of 2018, I became the chair or the president of FOLA, and I held that position until May of 2020. And then, of course, throughout all those years, I also maintained my practice at Mackesy Smy. So that's a bit about my background.
Now, Mike, with all that extensive background there, you've put your name forth for the bencher elections that are scheduled to happen, I guess, in 2 weeks, the start of voting. So what brought you to put your name forward for the Law Society bencher position?
It really came when I was involved with FOLA, because FOLA is regularly asked to comment on various proposals that are being considered, whether it's through the Ministry of the Attorney General or more relevant to being a bencher to the Law Society. So the Law Society would very commonly put out a call for comment to various stakeholders within the legal profession. And FOLA was one of those stakeholders. So when I was on the executive of FOLA and as its chair, I took part in a number of consultations on things like the transition from library code to what is now Learn, alternative business structures, contingency fee reform, the advertising and marketing changes to the rules of professional conduct, the competence task force, access to justice, lawyer licensing, all those sorts of things. And when I was doing that, I got to work with the benchers at that time, as well as a number of senior people at the Law Society, and I very much enjoyed the experience. I liked canvassing different ideas. I liked the collaborative process. I liked the back and forth. So when my term as chair of FOLA ended in the May of 2020, I thought I had more to contribute, and I wanted to continue to contribute. So when my term ended, I decided that when 2023 rolled around that I was going to run for bencher. So that's why I'm running.
All right, so 2023 here, it's a very unique bencher election and a lot different than any of the others previously, because you have the former Stop or Full Stop team on one end, and you have the Good Governance Coalition that you're a part of, and there's sort of a little bit of criticism, right, of the Good Governance Coalition that's running, saying, "Hey, we're running to kind of stop this slate here. The only thing worse than two slates is one slate, so we got to come together like as a necessary evil in order to sort of prevent against vote splitting like the last time. However, if we're elected, we pledge to look at electoral reform, which may look at doing away with slates or anything altogether. So you can see that that sort of been shared there, kind of like, should we make this leap of faith with this group? Because how is their soup different than this soup, right? In terms of the same kind of group kind of politic there. So what are your thoughts there, and how would you respond to that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I get that it seems rather odd that our coalition says we don't like slates. Slates are bad, so we're going to deal with that by forming our own slate. So when our slate beats your slate, we're going to stop slates. This is the way I kind of wrap my head around it, if I can use an analogy, and I think of it in terms of, imagine that we had a federal election, but there was only one party, and everybody else just ran as independents. And that one party decided to run a candidate in every single riding across the country. So in every riding, you had one party candidate and you had, say, 80 independent candidates. And say 15% of the vote went to the candidates of that one and only party. But the other 85% of the votes were split amongst the 80 independents. So the party wins every seat, but it wins every seat with only a small sliver of the vote. The Stop Slot did that in 2019, and it was a one issue really campaign to stop the statement of principles, and they succeeded. The statement of principles was repealed, and if that was the end of it, then there would be no need for a coalition. But they kind of doubled down, and now they're running more people on a different type of platform. And if you don't have a counter coalition or a counter slate, if you want to call it that, then you're going to have the same thing as my fictional federal election. You're going to have one party running with, say, 80 independents. The one party is going to get a minority of the vote, but they're going to win all the seats. It's like first past the post on steroids. So unfortunately, this is where we are. I don't think anybody particularly wants this or likes this. This parties may be a way that you do politics. It's not a good way to do regulation of a profession. And as I say, if 2019 was a one-off, it would be different, but it's not. It's being repeated. And so, unfortunately, we're in a position where we think something has to be done in order to really, hopefully, get a more representative opinion and representative group in convocation.
Now, again, one of the only things, in addition to hearing about not revisiting the statement of principles, is looking at electoral reform and whether it's about the slates, as we're just discussing, or anything else. I mean, Mike, what do you think, if anything, needs to be different? I mean, one of the aspects certainly is that you didn't touch on, that there was very low voter turnout generally. Who knows what the results are going to be later this month when we go to the polls on April the 19th. But I mean, what are some other ideas you may have about electoral reform or just the composition of our board of directors, the benchers at convocation?
Yeah, I know that is an issue that a number of candidates are most interested in. I mean, it's not top of mind for me, but I know that some of the issues are, well, first of all, you have between the 40 elected lawyer benchers, the 5 elected paralegal benchers, 8 lay benchers, so that's 53 benchers. So I know that there are people who think, well, that's just too many. There's too many people. It's unwieldy. That has to be pared down. Some of the other sort of balls that are up in the air are, why are people in downtown Toronto voting for benchers in Kenora or Thunder Bay or Ottawa? And similarly, why are people, hundreds of kilometers away from Toronto voting for benchers in Toronto? I'm fairly confident in saying that after this election in the next 4 years, there is going to be some discussion about electoral reform, in addition to whether or not slates can be allowed in the future. Again, it's not my top of mind electoral reform. I know there's some people in our group who are most interested in it, particularly the folks who have quite a lot of background in their professional practice representing regulated bodies.
So let's then maybe transition to what is top of mind for you, Mike. What are the things that are most important to you? If elected, you'd like to see the Law Society at Convocation kind of take a look more into?
I'm most interested in the people at the beginning end of their career. You get people who are called to the bar who land in really good jobs, really good placements. They make a good income. They get really great mentoring, but not everybody does. And you have a number of new calls who may not get a job at all and may have to try to either figure this out on their own or maybe get into an association with some of their colleagues who are also new calls. And I get concerned about the whole lack of mentoring for those folks. I've been, when you're president of stuff, you get invited to a number of things. You get invited to, when people are appointed to the bench or they're given special awards, the Law Society medal and things like that. And you get invited to those things. And I'll tell you the one thing you never hear when you go to those sorts of ceremonies, you never hear the recipient or the person who is being appointed to the bench stand up and tell everybody that they got there all on their own. They didn't have any help at all. Within the first 5 minutes of acknowledging their award or their appointment, they are thanking the people who helped get them there. And the reality is that you cannot meet your potential in this profession. And I'm sure this applies to paralegals as well, without mentoring. And I get concerned that there are quite a number of newer calls who are not getting the mentoring that would really help them practice to their full potential. So I would really like to see work being done in a collaborative way toward mentoring. I know that the Law Society has the Coach and Advisor Network, and that's great. And I know that the Advocate Society does work on mentoring, and that's great. And the Criminal Lawyers Association does too, and some local law associations do. But what I'd really like to see is a more cooperative approach to between all of the stakeholders, led by the Law Society, specifically with input from the judiciary, who are very interested, from my experience, in mentorship. To see if we can get a really great program together to help newer calls get really effective mentoring. A couple of the other things that I'm interested in is, if I look on the other side of the scale, people who are the most senior in the profession, who are really struggling to try to find a succession plan for their practice. It could be sole practitioners. It could be lawyers in small communities. It could be lawyers in in more remote communities who are ready to either retire or slow down, but they have great difficulty trying to find a way to pass on their practice or have a practice succession plan. And that is so important that you have it, even if you become sick or you have a really bad accident and all of a sudden you cannot practice for a period of time and you have no succession plan in place. That is a problem, and it is a problem particularly for a lot of souls, people in small communities and people in more remote communities. Technology, where are we going with AI? What threat does AI have in the legal landscape? How can it be regulated? How can the public be protected? Articling, articling is going to come up yet again in the next 4 years. Do we keep it? Do we not keep it? I'd like to know whether the Law Society can do more to encourage firms to take on students. Can they do more to facilitate souls and smalls to share articling students? Like if a sole practitioner can take a student on for a couple of months and knit that together with some other souls who can do likewise. So those are the sorts of things that are of particular interest to me.
So let's kind of go through some of that in a little bit more detail. Now, I certainly you talked about the mentorship piece, what's there, what's coming from other organizations. So what more, I mean, in terms of the Law Society's role in that? And I guess we can also maybe lump in articling here, because again, and talking about people at the beginning of their career, with regards to both of those points, I mean, what can be done both for the articling program as well for the newly licensed in terms of providing that mentorship and support for those just getting into the profession?
Yeah. So let me tell you an experience that I had when I was the chair of FOLA. So if I'm recalling correctly, it was in January of 2009. I was invited by, it was between the Attorney General of Ontario, who at that time was Carolyn Mulroney, and Chief Justice at the time, George Strathy, and Treasurer Malcolm Mercer of the Law Society, along with a number of other legal stakeholders, to attend a meeting at Osgoode Hall. And the subject of the meeting was to discuss ways to improve Ontario's justice system. So we all gathered. There was representatives from the major legal associations, legal aid, faculty, ROTA, the Advocate Society, criminal lawyers, etc. So there's a number of people around the table, and we all sat around and we exchanged ideas on how to make Ontario's justice system better. And I thought it was a really, really effective meeting. And the idea was we were going to meet again and go meeting after meeting to get these sort of collaborative ideas, everything on the table, everything was open for discussion. We were going to have a second meeting, and the second meeting was scheduled for the last week of March of 2020. And you know what happened the last week of March of 2020, everything just shut down. So what I would have in mind when we talk about mentoring and talking about a collaborative process is something like what I experienced back in January of 2019, which is start off in an open collaborative forum with the major stakeholders and start talking about what is needed, how can we meet that need, and who are the best associations or organizations to meet it. And I think the spearhead of all this should be the Law Society. And when I mentioned that the judiciary would like to get involved, I say that based on the number of judges who have told me I would be very much interested in helping out on something like that. Even Chief Justice Strathy, we invited him to FOLA to speak. And ahead of time, we had a conversation, and he said to me, "Mike, what do you want me to talk about?" And I said, "I want you to talk about what's on your mind. I want you to talk about what keeps you up at night." So when he came, and he spoke about a few things, but the first thing he talked about was mentoring. And, he talked in the Court of Appeal, the number of times he would see a young lawyer who really had potential, and, the panel going back afterwards and saying, if that lawyer just had a little bit of extra help, he or she could have just been that much better. I've had judges in the Superior Court say the same thing, judges in the Ontario Court of Justice. It's no fun for a judge to sit in court and watch a lawyer struggle. They want to be part of the solution, in my experience. So when we talk about, well, what can we do about mentoring, my starting point would be to have a meeting, and meetings in plural, similar to the one that we had way back in January of 2019, when we were talking about improving Ontario's justice system, and figure out what we can do better, where the need is, and how we can meet it. So that would be my approach to mentoring. You mentioned articling. I am a fan of articling. I think it's important. I would hate to see it go. I would like to explore whether there is more that can be done to facilitate smaller or sole firms to share in the articling process. As I said, if we can, if you can get 3 or 4 sole practitioners to each take an articling student for 2 months, it's particularly sole practitioners who have so much that they can teach to a potential articling student, then maybe we can get more graduates to have articling positions and open to them, and at the same time, hopefully, cut back on the cost of the LPP program.
Now, switching gears again, you went to the other end of the spectrum there, with the lawyers looking to kind of wind up their practices and succession plans. And you also touched on AI. And again, there's maybe a potential, from talking to a couple of other candidates, where there may be some potential overlap of these issues with respect to ownership of law firms, right? In terms of, with tech companies, right, that they may want to, whether it's someone finishing up or starting or in between, looking at ownership from non-lawyers, right? Because then there's more of a stake in the company. There's more of an investment of looking at a cross-section of technology and legal there, especially, with ChatGPT and everything in the news here. But you can certainly look at it differently in terms of what are some options there as you're looking at succession plans, because you only really have, maybe you bring in someone newer to kind of mentor and then pass the files off to them, or some of the others, if you're in a especially niche area, that there won't be that many other lawyers looking to pick up that work. So, I mean, what other ideas do you have that the law study can look at in terms of addressing the succession planning more so? I mean, I know there's stuff in the works now about making sure you've incorporated that into your own wills and things of that nature, but anything differently that the law study can be doing?
Yeah, so you've tried to unpackage some of that, because you mentioned AI on top of a succession plan. It's funny, the timing of it, because on Saturday the Globe and Mail did a really long piece on AI and ChatGPT that I read, and I found somewhat concerning, because one of the things that it said, although it didn't expand on it, was one of the industries that is particularly thought to be vulnerable to AI and ChatGPT was the legal industry. I don't have, the answers to where this is going. I don't have all of them. I have the concern. There are people certainly within our coalition. I think you spoke with Quinn Ross, and I think this is a particular interest of Quinn's. I can identify the concern about it. I can identify that it is something that is going to be a challenge to regulate. You mentioned about non-lawyer ownership of firms. Way back some years ago, when the big discussion was alternative business structures, and I was on the executive of FOLA, we were very, very concerned about where that was going to lead. I do not like the idea at all of it potentially leading to non-lawyer ownership of law firms. I am concerned about unforeseen consequences of where that sort of a thing could end up. And when you then put into it my concern for the senior lawyers in a succession plan, I don't see AI as the solution to that. I do see a place for the Law Society to try to facilitate assistance to senior lawyers in their succession planning. My understanding is that the cost to the Law Society of trusteeship proceedings for lawyers who do not have a succession plan and either pass away or become incapacitated, I think it's something like $2 million. I think that's what I read. So this is a matter that is not only needed for the bar, needed for those lawyers to give them the peace of mind that if something happens to them or they're ready to go, that they actually have a viable succession plan in place. But it's also good for the bar as a whole because $2 million is a lot of money. So it's something that needs to be addressed. And I suspect that it is going to be addressed certainly in the next 4 years.
Now, Mike, last couple questions here. Again, going back, the pendulum swinging all the way back to the beginning of the profession again. I have paralegal students probably listening. There's certainly some law students and those maybe even newly licensed that are tuning in, whether articling or not. But any words of wisdom, any advice you have from your near 40 years of practice that you'd like to impart on the next generation of lawyers and paralegals?
Well, the first thing I'd say is congratulations on your career choice. I think you made a good one, whether you're a legal professional or a paralegal professional. I have really enjoyed this profession. It's a profession that has been very good to me. It's a good way to make a living. You have a number of different options in your career that are very exciting. You can choose to work on your own and effectively become a small business owner. You can work with others, many others. You can, if you want to, you can give a voice to the marginalized. Your options are endless, so you've made a really good career choice, in my opinion. What I'd also say, and I say this to young lawyers who are coming into our firm, whether you're a lawyer or a paralegal, you're entering the service business. We don't make stuff and we don't sell goods. We sell service. So if you want any advice in how to succeed in this business, provide good service to your clients. And you know, in your own life experience, how pleasant it is to be served well by somebody in the service industry because you tell other people about it, and that's how you grow your business. One piece of advice that I would have for a young lawyer or a young paralegal is get involved, and when the time comes, give back. Minimally join associations. So if you're a lawyer, maybe join your local law association. If you're a paralegal, join the paralegal association. Get out, meet new people, people who practice in an environment that's different from your own or have a practice that's different from your own. Get their perspective of things and get what their experience is and then learn from it. And I guess the one other thing, the last thing that I would say is this sort of post-COVID environment. Get out there. Don't cocoon yourself in between your office and your house. You will have far more learning opportunities if you are out there amongst your colleagues. And those tiny little micro connections that you make with particularly more senior people or other people within your industry, being part of a conversation, you will pick up so much and so much experience from those little tiny conversations. They add up. And they add up to a great bank of experience. So, grab a coffee, chat on the side, but get out there. Don't stay at home.
Perfect, Mike. So thanks once again for taking the time for speaking with us today. Final question, perhaps the most important question. Why should any of the lawyers that are listening and have up to 40 votes, why should they cast a vote for you, Mike?
Well, I have the experience, I think, and I still have the desire to work hard and make a difference where I can. I have a long history of working collaboratively within the legal landscape. I'm open-minded. I'm not married to doing things only one way. I like results, so I like to identify the problem or the issue, work with others, and find a solution to it. Um, as I said, it's a profession that's been really good to me, and I'm not finished serving, and I want to continue to give back and hopefully make it even better.
Thanks once again, Mike, for taking the time, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, JP.